Hey, Howard. Yeah, we're reading there in the book of Revelation, and we're reading the marking, and you've got the 144,000. And if you notice that they're from the tribe of Israel. So I was listening to a gentleman in a podcast this week, and one of the things that struck me that seems to be a common theme among discussions of the Bible, especially with people who are not teaching Yahweh's commandments. They always have the same statements, they always have the same misconceptions, they always have the same errors all the time. It's consistent. So, there was a gentleman that came to a meeting that this is long time ago. We had a meal after the meeting, and he was a young man. He was walking on the road, I think, and had seen the sign. Just he had seen the sign on the road, and is that good? Is that better? He had seen the sign on the road about the meeting hall for Yahweh, and he came in and he was in the meeting. And after the meeting was over, after services, like we will today, have a communal meal where everybody eats together. And I could tell he was kind of hesitant at first to eat. And I explained to him, I said, well, everything here that we have is according to the law of Yahweh. So we're not going to have anything that's not considered clean. And he looked at me and said, okay. And I could tell there was a relief in his eyes, because it seemed to me he was hesitant and he wasn't sure what he was going to do. And so I asked him, I said, so you eat according to the Levitical law of what is food and what's not? He said, yes. And I said, I'm just curious, why do you do that? And he said, it's kind of a reasoning that took me back for a second, because I never heard it placed this way. But he said, there are three main monotheistic religions in the world. And what I mean by monotheistic is that they worship one, not multitudes, Buddhism, Hinduism. There's all of the Asian dominant religions, whether it be Indian, Pakistan, Chinese, they all basically worship many. And the nations that Yahweh gave the children of Israel, he helped Israel defeat them. They worshiped many. They always had a different God that they were worshiping. And it might represent, whether it's the fish in the sea, or whether it's the fowls in the air, whether it's the sun or the moon or whatever. There was always multiples. They said there's only three monotheistic religions in the world. And he said, they're Judaism, which that they worship Yahweh. They have the Muslim religion, which worships Allah. And he said, then you have Christianity, which worships the Lord. So I thought about that for a second. He says, well, 2 out of the 3 don't eat pork. They don't eat shellfish. So he says, I figure 2 out of 3 got it right. So that's why I choose to eat that way. And I thought, well, it's an interesting concept, but it worked for him, and it was leading him on a path that was true. But how many times have you ever had people ask you, what religion are you? Raise your hands if you've had somebody ask you that question. What is your religion?
Just before we got here.
Okay, so it's a common question. People want to know, if they find out that you are religious, they will generally ask you, well, what religion are you? And of course, they're probably mainly asking about a denomination of Christianity. And you think about the concept of when I said monotheistic, I kind of think that Christianity might be a little bit mixed up in that because they actually worship Father, the Son, and the set apart Spirit, or they would call him the Holy Ghost. And so you have the Trinity. Well, they're kind of mixed up because they worship three. But, when Joshua was referenced that he was a good man, you remember what Joshua said when he was referred to as being a good man. So it was in John, Book of John.
There is
not read that. Huh?
There is but one good.
There is but one good. And he was referring to the Father. So Yeshua, who is our King to come, who is our Savior that Yahweh provided for us, said himself that there's only one, and that is Yahweh. And so I think that when you think about the three monotheistic religions, I'm not sure that Christianity's quite got it figured out yet, because they're still struggling to try to figure out, who they're going to worship. So I was listening to this individual, and I don't know, I just thought that, what is it? What do we say is our religion? And one of the ways that I think we end up rendering our faith is that we are either Hebrews or the lost sheep, but in essence, we are following the old ways, the way, the only way. There's only one way. Yahshua said there's only one door. He's the door. There's only one true shepherd. He said, many will come, but there's only one true shepherd. He says, my sheep will hear my voice and they will follow me. So there's only one way, one path, one door to please Yahweh. He didn't open it up and just said, okay, if that feels good to you, that's okay for you. He never said that, ever. So in the book of Deuteronomy, one of the things that I thought I would share with you, and we'll read this. This is in the 4th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. Now, I'm going to start with about 10, but I kind of paraphrase a little bit of what's going on in chapter 1. It says, now therefore hearken, O Israel, unto the statutes and unto the judgments which I teach you, for you to do them. It says, that you may live and go in and possess the land which Yahweh, the Elohim of your fathers, gives you. And you shall not add unto the word which I command, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that you may keep the commandments of Yahweh, your Elohim, which I command you. Your eyes have seen what Yahweh did because of Baal Peor, and for all the men that follow Baal Peor, and Yahweh destroyed them from among you. That you did not cleave unto Yahweh your Elohim and are alive, but you did cleave to Yahweh, and you are alive this day. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me, that you should do so in the land where you possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of nations, which shall hear of all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is wise and an understanding people. For what nation is there so great, and who hath an Elohim so nigh unto them, close to them, as Yahweh your Elohim is in all things that we call upon him for? For what nation is there so great that has statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I have set before you this day. He said, take heed to yourself and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things which your eyes have seen, and lest you depart let them depart from your heart all the days of your life, to teach them to your sons and your sons' sons. Yes.
Where are you at?
I'm in Deuteronomy. I'm in the verse, I'm starting in the beginning to kind of, I said I was going to paraphrase, I decided just to read it. Deuteronomy 1. We're getting to 10. So, sorry. He says, especially the day from which you stood before Yahweh, thou Elohim, and Horeb. I'm in 10, Deuteronomy 4:10. And Yahweh said unto me, gather me the people together, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days, and that they live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children. And you came near and stood under the mountain. The mountain burned with fire in the midst of the heaven, with darkness and clouds and thick darkness. And Yahweh spoke unto you out of the midst of the fire. And you heard the voice and the words, but you saw no image. You saw no familiar, nothing. You just heard the word. This was the point. They saw nothing. They only heard the word. Can you imagine standing at that mountain and hearing Yahweh himself speak to you? It says, Yahweh spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You didn't have you saw no similitude, only you heard a voice. And he declared in verse 13, unto you his covenant, which he commanded to you to perform, even the 10 commandments that he wrote upon the 2 tables of stone. Yahweh commanded me at that time to teach you the statutes and judgments, that you might do them in the land where you go. Take heed, therefore, unto yourselves, for you saw no manner of similitude of anything familiar on the day that Yahweh spoke to you in Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you corrupt yourselves and make a graven image, or the similitude of any figure, the likeness of a male or female, the likeness of any beast that is on the earth, of any winged fowl that's in the air, the likeness of anything that creepeth on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the waters beneath the earth. Unless thou lift up thy eye to heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, that all the host of the heavens should be driven to worship them and serve them, which Yahweh the Elohim hath divided unto all the nations under the whole heaven. Yahweh gave all of everything in the heavens to every nation on the face of the earth. They all see it. It is not just to Israel. And he said, take and make sure Yahweh hath taken you, so I'm going to read here, but Yahweh hath taken you and brought you forth out of the iron furnace, even out of Egypt, to be unto him a people of inheritance, as you are this day. Now, why am I going back to Israel? What is this got to do with us today? You know, most people tell you, well, we're not Jews, so this has nothing to do with us, right? Israel was 12 tribes. Just by the way, I know you all know it in this room, but let yourself always be mindful of one thing. Israel is 12 tribes. Judah, the Jews, are from the tribe of Judah, is only one of the 12. We just read in the book of Revelation the sealing of the 144,000, and I didn't see them all coming from the tribe of Judah. There's 12 tribes mentioned there. There are 12,000 in each tribe. Yahweh has still chosen Israel. And it's very apparent in the book of Revelation that Yahweh has not changed his mind. Yahweh is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He did not change his mind. There's not just a dispensation that was good for Israel back when they were in Egypt, and now there's another dispensation that's come along because the Messiah came. And the two don't correlate. That's bull. That's man's teachings. That's the problem. Man cannot seem to follow the simple things that Yahweh said to do. He said, don't worship any image, don't worship anything. You only heard the voice. What is Yeshua the Messiah? The Word made flesh. The Word. He said, the words that I speak are not mine, they're from the Father. It's still the Word. It's always been the Word. So he goes on to say that he chose Israel as a peculiar people. Now Yahweh has the right to do whatever he wants to do. He created the heavens and the earth. He created everything that is above and below. He owns it all. But he chose a peculiar people. Why? Because of Abraham. Promise he made you Abraham. Because Abraham was found faithful. He believed Yahweh when Yahweh said, I will make your descendants as the stars of heaven. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't ask for, show me how you're going to do it. He didn't ask for a blueprint. He just believed him. Not so much in that he believed him only in word and deed, but when he was going to offer up Isaac, his son, his only son at that time, he still believed that Yahweh was going to fulfill everything he told him. So even in the offering of his son, the willingness to do so, he clearly demonstrated that his faith was not just words and deeds, but his faith was visible. So that's why Yahweh loved Abraham. Without faith, it's impossible to please Yahweh. We cannot please Yahweh without faith. It is impossible. I don't care how many good deeds you do on the face of this earth. If you don't have faith, you're not going to please him. So he chose them because of Abraham, his promise to Abraham. And he said, through you, I will bless all the nations on the face of the earth. But he's bringing one group of people out of Egypt. So, and he says, to be an inheritance as you are this day. Verse 20. Furthermore, Yahweh was angry with you for your sakes. And he said, he swore that I can't go in. Moses is talking now. Because of what Moses did, because of his anger to the children of Israel, because they pressed him without measure, I'm sure of no question that they just wore him thin. Constant bickering, constant lack of faith, constant lack of understanding. I mean, here's a nation, here's a people that saw Yahweh firsthand destroy the greatest nation on the face of the earth. Step by step by step. Plague by plague by plague, he tore them down to nothing. And to the point that he destroyed their army in the sea. The same sea that they walked across on dry ground. Can you imagine if he did that for you and you were witnesses of that? Where would you be on this side? Think about it. I'm telling you, days are coming that that's going to be nothing compared to what he's going to do. Nothing. They won't even remember it anymore. Yahweh's word says so. They won't remember that anymore. As great as that was, and I'm not taking anything away from the greatness of that, they won't remember it anymore because of what he still has in store yet for us. It says, 23, take heed lest you forget the covenant that Yahweh made with you, and that you do create these graven images and likeness of things and the forbidden thing, for Yahweh is a consuming fire. And verse 26, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that you shall utterly perish from the land where you go over to Jordan to possess, and you shall not prolong your days, but you shall utterly be destroyed. Why? Because Yahweh knew they were not going to do what he asked them to do. He knows the end from the beginning. He is calling them to witness this day. You know what? This is written for our admonition. He's calling them and telling them, well, everything he did, and he chose them, and he loved them, and yet they were going to forsake him. And what's he going to do? Verse 27, and Yahweh shall scatter you among the nations, and you shall be left few in number among the heathen, where Yahweh shall lead you. And there ye shall serve the gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But if from thence you shall seek Yahweh your Elohim, and then you shall find him, if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul, when you are in tribulation. Matthew 24. Where are we today? We are in that time where we're in the beginning sorrows, the birth pains, and we are headed towards the greatest tribulation that the earth has ever seen. And it will never, ever see it ever again as bad as it's going to be, possibly in our days. We sit here in this room knowing what's coming. It said, but when you're in tribulation and all these things come to you, even in the latter days, if you turn to Yahweh your Elohim and shall be obedient unto his voice. What was the voice? The 10 Commandments. And then the judgments and statutes which told you how to fulfill each of those 10 Commandments. All the judgments and statutes are just trying to help you understand how do you keep the 10 Commandments. How do you love your neighbor as yourself? Because if you do something and you cause his animal to die or whatever it is and you have to repay it, you add a fifth to it. We just read that. It's just a simple statute. That's how you do it. These are all things that you think, oh man, they're so complicated. They're not complicated. They're just trying to teach you how that you are to react with your neighbor. Because the two greatest commandments are love Yahweh with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that is all of the commandments are wrapped up in those two thoughts. Everything that he ever spoke from that mountain. Deal with those two things. So, he says, for Yahweh your Elohim is a merciful Elohim who will not forsake you, neither destroy you, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he sware unto them. The covenant. He's not going to forget the covenant. Today we're told the covenant's changed. The only thing that changed on the covenant was the promises. And where he would write the law. The covenant itself did not change. There was no fault in the covenant. There was never a fault in the covenant. You know, in Deuteronomy 32, before we get out of the book of Deuteronomy, I've come to realize that Deuteronomy, more than, of all the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, what we refer to as the Tanakh or the Tanakh, Deuteronomy is the most prophetic. Without a doubt. When you read 32, the entire, we're not going to read all of 32 because it's fairly long. But it says, it starts out, give ear, O heavens, and I will speak. And hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. This is Yahweh speaking. My doctrine shall drop as rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass, because I will publish the name of Yahweh. Hold back the 4 winds until what did they do? They seal the name of the servants, the 12,000 from each tribe with the name of Yahweh. When David came down to the battlefield and Goliath was mocking Yahweh, and he said, "Send me your strongest and your best to defeat me on this battlefield." The little shepherd boy said, "I'll go do it." And Saul said, "Here, take my armor." He said, "No, I'll just take Yahweh's name." He said, "Because I know that Yahweh will not let that piece of crap sit down there and mock him. That's all I need is Yahweh with me." And he slew Goliath without the armor. It's his faith. You know, I've always said that I think that that's one of the things that Yahweh so loved David about, was because when Joshua clearly says in the New Testament, "I lay my life down. No man takes it from me. I give it freely." You know, oftentimes it's said that Yahweh killed his only begotten son. Yahweh did not kill his only begotten son. We make that clear and plain to you. He did not kill his only begotten son. He allowed him to come down and do what he did. It was his free will, his free choice. It was not something that he had to do. It was something he wanted to do. And he divested all of the armor that he had when he dwelt in heaven with Yahweh. Trust me. As the scriptures tell us, Yahweh entrusted him with everything. He created all things by him and for him. He had no level of power that anything in the universe could exceed except his Father himself. And he gave it all up and came down without the armor to defeat death on the battlefield. So I think that's why, you know, with all the faults that David had, we all got faults. Yahweh is merciful. You know what? Without his mercy, we'd all be dead. And without that mercy, we're never going to see him. But we're promised we get to see him if we choose to follow his ways. That's all he's asking. So, you know, in the book of Deuteronomy 32, we know that, like in verse 21, it says, "I will move them to jealousy." This is after Yahweh has scattered Israel because they worship devils, demons, and gods that no one knew, whom your fathers feared not. And of the rock that begot you, you were unmindful of the rock. The scriptures keeps talking about that rock. You know, Daniel, you want to know how's all this come together? Daniel, in his vision, saw what Nebuchadnezzar dreamed. He saw the image of the gold and the silver and the bronze and the metal and the 10 toes iron mixed with clay. And he saw this entire image standing. Yet he saw a rock cut out without hands. And the rock smashed the 10 toes and then continued until it smashed every piece of the idol until it was nothing but powder. And then the wind blew it away. The rock. Daniel saw the rock in a way that prophetically it tells us what's going to happen. Joshua is that rock. And when they were walking in the wilderness and they needed water, he was the rock. The rock that begot you. He said, you lightly esteemed it. So I thought, well, how is it that man can just get it so messed up that they now want to proclaim that those laws do not exist to the New Testament believers. Those were for the Jews. Just the Jews. I'm thinking, you don't even know history. You don't even know who the Jews are. More or less, you don't even know who Israel is. And you don't know that Israel's scattered in the four corners of the earth to this day. It's not this little piece of country that they keep talking about on the news. And I'm not saying that there's not tribes of Israel there. That's not the point. That is not prophetically what Yahweh is referring to when he's talking about Israel and what he's going to do in the latter days. That is not the focal point. His throne will be there, Jerusalem. He chose it, but he also calls it in the book of Revelation, he says the city, which is spiritually Sodom and Egypt, where the Messiah was impaled. So he doesn't speak of it in very flattering terms in the way it is today, does he? But he knows what it's going to be because he says, I will put my throne there forever. So don't get the two confused when you're talking about, when people are talking to you prophetically about what's going on, because today, it says, those that bless Israel will be blessed, those that curse Israel will be cursed. That's Yahweh's people. That's Yahweh's people. Joshua says, I don't know who you are. And they said, well, we did all these things. He said, when I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was hungry, did you feed me? Because that's where Israel is. And because if they did those things, guess what? They're blessed. But if they don't, they're cursed. That's what it means to bless Israel or to curse Israel. When you get really down to the nitty-gritty, that's it. Not talking about a geographical piece of land. So, in Jeremiah, the prophets, all the prophets, the scripture says in the book of Revelation, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Yahshua Messiah. Think about that. The spirit of prophecy. Everything that's ever been prophesied, even over here in Deuteronomy, when these were all prophetic writings, 32nd chapter. It is a powerful prophecy. It's all about the testimony of Yahshua Messiah. How does that come together? In Jeremiah, the 31st chapter, the prophet Jeremiah is saying prophetically, interesting, then in the 23rd and 24th verse, right above the 31st chapter starting, says, behold, the whirlwind of Yahweh goeth forth with fury, a continuing whirlwind, and it shall fall with pain upon the head of the wicked. And the fierce anger of Yahweh shall not return until he have done it, and until he have performed the intents of his heart. In the latter days you shall consider it. The whirlwind. Hold back the four winds, because he's going to do something that has never been seen on the face of the earth, ever. It says, at that same time, saith Yahweh, I will be the Elohim of all of the families of Israel, and they shall be my people. Prophetic. Thus saith Yahweh, the people which were left of the sword found grace in the wilderness, even Israel, when I went to cause him to rest. Yahweh hath appeared of old unto me, saying, yea, I have loved thee with an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness I have drawn thee. Again, I will build thee. What's he talking about? Oh.
What verse are you in?
Yeah,
I'm 30, Jeremiah 31.
31.
Starting with verse 1. Jeremiah 31. Verse 1 says, at that time, says Yahweh, I will be Elohim to all the families of Israel. Okay? And they shall be my people. Now, did he not say in Egypt that he brought them out of the furnace to be a peculiar people unto him? And then he says he's going to scatter them to all the countries and disperse them. And then he says in Jeremiah 31, at the latter days, at that time, I will be an Elohim to all the families of Israel. This is not a different group of people. One. 31:1. Not a different people. He says, thus saith Yahweh, the people which, this is two, which were left of the sword found grace in the wilderness, even Israel, when I went to cause him to rest. And Yahweh appeared of old unto me, saying, yea, I have loved thee with an everlasting love. Therefore with loving kindness I have drawn thee. Again I will build thee, and thou shalt be built, O Virgin of Israel. Thou shalt again be adorned with the tabrets, and go forth with the dances of them that make merry. You shall yet plant vines in the mountains of Samaria. The planters shall plant, and you shall eat. For they shall be in the day that the watchman upon the mount of Ephraim shall cry, arise, get you up into Zion, unto Yahweh your Elohim. Thus saith Yahweh, sing gladness for Jacob, verse 7, and shout among the chief of the nations. Publish and say, Yahweh, save thy people, the remnant of Israel. For behold, I will bring you from the north country and gather them from the coast of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame and the woman with child and her that travaileth with child together, a great company, and they shall return. They shall come with weeping and supplication. I will lead them and cause them to walk by the rivers of the waters in a straight way, and they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. It's interesting, Ephraim is his firstborn. If you remember Joseph, when he brought his two sons to Jacob, and Israel often is referred to as Jacob. When they're all together, it's often referred to as Jacob. When they're separated, it's referred to as Judah and Ephraim. But he put the right hand of blessing upon Ephraim, even though Joseph said, no, that's not the firstborn. He says, I know what I'm doing. Put the right hand of blessing upon Ephraim. So Yahweh was guiding him to do so when he did so. He says, Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of Yahweh, O ye nations, declare it in the isles afar off, and say, he that scattered Israel will gather him and keep him as a shepherd does his flock. As a shepherd does his flock. Well, in the book of Matthew, it's interesting that we find in the 15th chapter, this is something else that I do not remember. Now, I will say I have not been in the worldly churches for a long time. So I'm saying that I was not aware when I was going to the worldly churches that I ever remember much context being talked about what Yeshua is going to say right here. But he does say in Matthew 15:24, he says, and he answered and said, I am not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Why is he saying that he was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel? Because in Jeremiah, it just says right here, he that scattered Israel will gather them and keep them as a shepherd does his flock. Is Joshua the shepherd? In the book of John, in the 10th chapter, it says in verse 7, Joshua said unto them, verily, or truly, truly, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I'm the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes in but for to steal and to kill and destroy. I have come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. It says, the hireling fleeth when he is an hireling and careth not for the sheep. But I am the good shepherd. Verse 14. I know my sheep, and I am known of mine. In other words, this sheep know him. For as the Father loveth me, even so I love the Father, and I'll lay my life down for the sheep. He says, and other sheep I have which are not of this fold, I must also bring them, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay my life down that I might take it up again. This is it, what I just told you earlier. No man takes it from me, but I'll lay it down of myself. I have the right to lay it down. I have the right to take it up. This command have I received of my Father. Yahweh gave him the okay to do that. You know, John the Baptist, when he sees him, he says, behold the Lamb that takes away the sins of the world. So in the book of Jeremiah, we read that he's going to gather his sheep. So we're going to skip down to verse 20. It talks about, I'm back in Jeremiah 31. So I just went from Jeremiah over to John, or Matthew and John, to read about the shepherd.
Jeremiah 31,
I'm gonna be in Jeremiah 31 probably for a little while. So I'm trying to establish what Yahweh's doing, how he's doing what he's doing, what he said in the book of Deuteronomy that he was going to do, and he was going to scatter them, yet he says he's going to regather them. And how that has never changed, and how today that when people are teaching from the word of Yahweh, oftentimes they do not teach the word of Yahweh correctly. They will not teach that Yahweh's commands have never, ever gone away. That Yahweh's desire to keep his commandments have never gone away. That the very Sabbath itself is nothing more than an act on our part to say that we want to enter into your rest. Does it not say in the New Testament, if they had entered into his rest when Joshua the son of Nun took them into the promised land? Now, that scripture, by the way, is misquoted in the King James because it says, translated the word Jesus. But it's not referring to the Savior. It was referring to Joshua the son of Nun. So the translators didn't understand. They just saw the Hebrew word and said, oh, okay, well, that's got to be Jesus. That was not the case. It was talking about Joshua the son of Nun taking the children of Israel into the promised land. And he said if that was the end of the rest, he would never have spoken of another day. The rest to come is still yet to happen. That is the kingdom. That is why when Joshua when he rose in the clouds, the last thing his disciples asked him was, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? What would that have to do with anything if you're going to go to heaven and you're going to live in heaven, right? And you got the pearly gates up there. What does that got to do with anything about the restoring of the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom to Israel? It doesn't fit. Just like Peter's vision, that you don't call what Yahweh has cleansed common and unclean. He wasn't talking about food. He never changes. He does not change. Yahweh's consistent. He never changes. He was talking about the nations, the Gentiles, who Jews, Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, primarily who lived in the land of Jerusalem at the time, thought they were unclean. You couldn't have anything to do with them. Matter of fact, if you had a Gentile in your house, you could be put to death. This was not a light thing. You have, for us, we just kind of take this kind of, it's words. We weren't living in those days knowing how, you think in the 30s and 40s, when you talk about the segregation, you think that was bad? That was nothing compared to the segregation there was between the Gentiles and the Jews. That was segregation.
And it's still there.
And it very well may be, because Yahweh says in the latter days, he will take the enmity away from Judah and Ephraim, because it still exists. He will take those two sticks and bind them into one, and he will make one nation out of them. This is all prophetic. This has all to do with us. I would contend that we're the tribe of Ephraim sitting over here in this land. If you look at where Ephraim's encamped around Jerusalem, it's on the west. Yes.
Ephraim has been waking up in the last one. And I just correlated to everything that's going on.
Because in Deuteronomy 4 it says, when you find yourself
Yes.
in tribulation, when you find yourself in times of trouble, the lockdown that took place in this country, in the world, you know that since that time, there's probably been more people that have come to the knowledge of the truth about Torah, Yahweh's commandments, and Yahweh's name than at any other one singular time that I can remember in my short walk on this earth. Why? Because they were locked down. They were like Pharaoh to Israel in Egypt, taskmasters. There's a lot of correlation when you think about it in prophetic terms. So yeah, all of a sudden they're waking up and saying, you know what, I'm in a land and something's not right. And they're coming back to Yahweh. And Yahweh says, if you return to me, I'll return to you.
You know what's ironic there is over in Revelation when you read 144,000, it talks about Manasseh and Joseph as being part of the 144,000. It doesn't mention Ephraim, but over here it says that Ephraim is the first one.
Yeah, well, so Ephraim,
And Joseph took that.
yeah, well, Ephraim stands for Joseph, or
Yeah,
Joseph
I know,
stands
I'm
for
just
Ephraim.
saying
Yes, but
that's
I
right.
agree.
It mentioned that Ephraim was the firstborn, but then there it mentioned Joseph.
And it was,
But it actually mentioned Manasseh also.
Yeah. But-
It's 144,000.
Ephraim is the firstborn of Joseph per Jacob's hand.
Damn.
So- Yeah, I don't think you can deny Ephraim is there because Joseph's there. So when you find the children of Israel encamped around the tent of meeting, you don't find Joseph's tribe mentioned. You find Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, got the double portion. So Joseph double portion was Ephraim and Manasseh. So that's how it worked out. If you look at how they're encamped around the tent of meeting, and you see this encampment, you'll understand when it talks about the north and the south and the east and the west. Because you had three tribes on the north, three on the east, three on the south, three on the west. And you know that out of those three, one tribe was the banner holder for the three tribes. Judah on the east, Ephraim on the west, Dan on the north. And I forget who it was on the south. Dan's not mentioned in a lot of places because Dan took the children of Israel. He was the first one to cause them to go into idolatry by saying, we'll build a meeting place up here. You don't got to go to the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem. Prophetically, Yahweh says, if you don't come to the Feast of Tabernacles when Yeshua sets up the kingdom, you're not going to get rain. He didn't change. Nothing changed on this. He's not going to change. You're going to go back to the way it was. But Dan said, no, come up here. We'll worship Baal up here. We got the golden calf, and that way you can save yourself a lot of trouble. And they did so, and there's reason for Dan not being mentioned. So anyway, I don't want to be getting to where I got a few things I still want to read and kind of get this. So Bear with me. So we're in Jeremiah 31. The reason that I wanted to go to Jeremiah 31 was it also talks about not only gathering Israel back from the four corners of the earth, it talks about him bringing them in as his sheep. But in 31, chapter 31 of 31, it says, behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Israel and Judah. And it says, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them out by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they broke, although I was a husband unto them. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, saith Yahweh, I will put my law in their inward parts. I will write it in their hearts, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And they shall no more have to teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, do you know Yahweh? For they shall all know me, from the least to the greatest, saith Yahweh, for I will forgive their iniquities and remember their sin no more. You know, where else do you find that? That's interesting, isn't it? Book of Jeremiah, we're reading that, and lo and behold, if you go over in the New Testament, you go to the Hebrews, the 8th chapter, the book of Hebrews, talking about the high priest who now sits at the right hand of the throne of majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary, the true tabernacle which Yahweh pitched, not man. We know who this is. This is talking about Yeshua Messiah. It says, I'm not going to read it all because it says that he offered himself once. Talking about the example of the shadow of heavenly things as Moses was admonished when he told him to make the tabernacle exactly as he saw it. But Yeshua is in the truth. In the book of Revelation, you do see that the heavens are opened and you see the Ark of the Covenant. That's not the man-made ark. That's the true ark. Everything that was in the tent of meeting was patterned after what Moses saw in the heavenly realm. Everything. It's a pattern. If you want to know what the heavens look like, just study that. And you'll have a much greater understanding of what is in the heavens. Because he showed it to us. He gave us the pattern. So it says, talk about Yeshua. It's interesting that here it talks about, it repeats the same scripture as in Jeremiah 31. For finding fault with them, he said, behold, the days come. And that in verse 13, I'm not going to read it all again, but in verse 13, he quoted it line for line. In the verse 13, in that he said, a new covenant, he hath made the first old, now which decayeth and waxeth old and ready to vanish away. For verily the first covenant had also had the ordinances of divine service and worldly sanctuary, for where the tabernacle was made first and the candlestick and so forth, it goes on to talk about this heavenly. The point is this, what is he writing in our hearts and our minds? It's the same thing that he wrote on the tables of stone. It's the same thing. So it's no wonder that when you get to, like in the book of Revelation, and you read this, the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation, and it's talking about the dragon. And it says, verse 17, and I'm not going to read everything about this, but I just want you to kind of mentally make this note. So the dragon was wroth with the woman. The woman was Israel. This is what this is talking about. Revelation 12:17. So the dragon, which is Satan, is wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of Yahweh and have the testimony of Yeshua Messiah. They keep the commandments. Why was he mad with them? Because they keep the commandments of Yahweh and have the testimony of Yeshua Messiah. Not only in Revelation there, but about 14th chapter. You go over to 14:12. Here is the patient of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of Yahweh and the faith of Yeshua Messiah. If the commandments are done away with, why is it in the book of Revelation, the last book written, that every reference here is talking about those that keep the commandments of Yahweh and the faith of Yeshua Messiah? Why? If it was done away with, it would not need to say so, would it? But since it says so, it's a witness that we know. In the book of Revelation says, as if we read the book of Revelation, it says, blessed is he that readeth and they that hear the words of this prophecy. It's a blessing to read it, and it's a blessing to hear it. And the blessing is in that they that keep the commandments of Yahweh and the testimony of Yeshua Messiah. And before we leave Revelation, chapter 22, verse 14. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they might have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. The tree of life. Where was the tree of life first seen? Garden of Eden. Comes full circle. The whole point of the restoration of the kingdom of Israel is to bring them back to what Yahweh promised them. And guess what? Yahweh said he would bless all families on the earth through the seed of Abraham. He scattered those 10 tribes to the four corners of the earth to mingle that seed so that anyone that has faith, they don't have to worry about, are you the seed of Abraham? That should not be your worry, because the scripture plainly says in Galatians that if you are Messiahs, then you are Abraham's seed. Galatians 3:19. So you are the tribe of Israel. The promises to the tribe of Israel are yours. And the whole purpose of Yeshua coming and dying was to redeem us back to the Father, to bring us into the kingdom of Yahweh, the 1,000 years he will set up on this earth, that his plan of perfection can be seen. And when Yahweh took the children of Israel out of Egypt, did he not say that if you keep all my commandments, all the nations of the face of the earth will come to you and say, what a great nation is this, that hath such blessings, that hath the word of their Elohim that they hear. Israel would have been a blessing to every nation on the face of the earth. You got just a taste of it under Solomon, before he was led astray with all of his wives. Because they all wanted to come here to see the wisdom of Solomon. They wanted to see the glory of Israel. And in its day, that day, we can see since then it has never been like that. But that will pale in comparison to what it will be under Yahshua Messiah. Because Revelation 21, I'll close with this and then I'll take any questions. In Revelation 21, after it's all said and done, what do you see? A new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the set-apart city, New Jerusalem, coming down from Yahweh out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. The city of prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of Yahweh is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and Yahweh himself shall be with them, and their Elohim, and Yahweh shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying, neither anything of more pain, for the former things are all passed away. That is the plan. That's the good news, is it not? The good news, people ask you, what's the glad tidings? The glad tidings are that Yahweh provided a Redeemer for us, Yeshua Messiah. And that he's rose from the dead, so death is conquered. So the promise of life everlasting is ours. To deliver us to this point right here. Yahweh be praised.
So, Israel, when they left out of Egypt, almost kind of reminded me of Ephraim waking up now. And here we are coming out of Egypt, because look at us, we're trying to escape the system. So we're trying to break him away, So just, I don't know, there's just so much correlation with everything that happened back then.
Now, I think the more we awaken, the more we understand that the true blessing is what Yahweh has in store for us.
Yes.
And that everything this world has to offer us is nothing. It's nothing. It's temporary. It's fake. Underneath it all, it's just filled with hypocrisy and lies and deceit, murder, greed, and more greed. And those that have the most, that have more than they could ever utilize on themselves, all they want is more. Because they serve an Elohim that is insatiable. Greed. There's nothing wrong with all the governments on the face of the earth is one common thing: greed. If you didn't covet what your neighbor had, I always tell people this. I said, I don't care if you believe in the Bible or not, but I'll give you 4 things, maybe 5, that I will guarantee you that if this world did, you and I would be much happier. And that is, if people didn't lie, if people didn't bear false witness, if they didn't want what you have, and they didn't murder. Could you imagine where the world would be if they did those 4 things? Just think about it.
Maybe
those 4 things. Yahweh gave 10. I'm not taking anything away from the 10. I'm just saying, heck, if you could do 4 of them, I would be happy. But Yahweh demands more. First 5 are for him anyway. So the last 5 are for mankind. Yes, sir.
Well, what you generally see is when the people you was talking about listening to a preacher, and they always go to the same thing, the rapture. The very first word that comes out of 90% of his mouth, well, these are the things you don't have to do. Rather than say, well, this is what we need to do to be happy. No, here's what you don't. They start tearing things down of what you don't have to do, and these commandments and stuff. And it said you have to do all of it. But that's the first thing they do is start tearing it down and say you don't have to do this, this, and this.
Well, most of the things that the world entices us to want to do are contrary to what Yahweh wants us to do. And so the conflict is not that. Our conflict is, do we want to make Yahweh happy or the world happy? So,
He's the only accolade we need.
Yahweh knows we're flesh and blood. He knows our weaknesses. He knows how he built us. He created us. He knows it all. But he still also has provided a path. And that path is the commandments and the testimony of Yeshua Messiah. Every time. Yahweh said, for you I give you life or death. Choose life. Now we're talking about everlasting life. That's the true life. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Or you were going to say something that
Welcome to the 70s. One thing here is in
Yeah.
It talks about after his return, we will all go to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Now, how many different churches run into that says all feast days are just Jewish, they've been done away with, we don't have to do them anymore. We don't have to do them anymore. Why is the first thing he's going to do is take us to the
Well, the Christians have already been raptured out by that part of it.
Yeah.
Well,
They're raptured out in chapter 3.
If they were not for the Gentiles, then why are the Gentiles going to be punished with plagues of no rain and stuff if they don't come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles? So the Feast of Tabernacles and the rest of the feast days are shadows of things to come. And they are very important that we understand.
Yeah, the three appointed times that Yahweh calls his sons, and I mean sons by all of us, because the scripture says in Messiah, there's no difference between male or female. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have roles physically on this earth. I'm not saying that's not true, because it is true. But in Messiah, when it talks about sons coming before Yahweh, it means us all. And so those 3 times are the plan of salvation. The covering, which causes the release. You know that the firstborn being spared caused the release of all Israel out of Egypt. Do you not think that the 144,000, which are the firstborn, that being redeemed are not going to cause the whole other? Because he says later on, he says, what's this great multitude? Well, wait a minute, they're all coming. The second Exodus, I've thought about this. The second Exodus is when Yeshua returns, he gathers his sheep. And we're going to be waiting for him. I'm not saying that we won't be in the wilderness, but that's not the gathering. The gathering is us waiting for him, because when he returns, he will gather his sheep. That's this great Exodus that the world has never seen, nor will ever see again. That's the one that when he does what he does to the nations to deliver his sheep from those nations, will make what Yahweh did to Egypt look like child's play. But never remember it. Book of Revelation is telling you what's going to happen, and it's all about the second Exodus. Really.
Yesterday, a guy by the name of Jimmy Evans, I kind of liked him. He had, he got out there and he was giving the, he named every high day in the Jewish deal. And he said, but now we don't have to do those, because that was the Jewish law. And then he went, you can do Christmas and Easter, and he knew what every one of them was.
So you
talk about the blood moon, the 7th, and we don't know what day the the trumpets is going to be and everything. But then he just flat out said those have been done away with until Messiah.
You don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but it's against spiritual wickedness high places. And that spiritual wickedness is, if you'll trade in the Messiah's blood for a bunny rabbit and an Easter egg, you're not going to be covered. And if you're not covered when the death angel comes, what's going to happen? So you see the point of Satan, what he wants you to do. He wants you to not be in the right place at the right time. He does not want you to keep all his commandments, because he does not want you to live. Satan wants you to die. He wants everyone to die. That's what he wants. He wants all of us in this room to die. That's why he is wroth with us. He's going to be wroth with us. It's not going to be pretty. But you know what? We know the end of the story, so it don't really matter. Let him do what he's going to do. Yes.
In the, what is
The, t- the,
the tent of
so you mean talking about the tabernacle, the tent of appointment? Okay. So the tent of appointment was you were to come to that tent, whether you had an appointment with Yahweh for a sin offering, whether you were coming to that on the Day of Atonement. What do you, the high priest, imagine what the high priest does for you alone on the Day of Atonement. He confesses all of the sins for your forgiveness, our forgiveness, all of us in this room. Could you imagine? I mean, where would you be without the high priest? And if, by the way, if the commandments are done away with and you don't got to keep the law, then why is Yeshua a high priest? If there is no law, there is no covenant, why is Yeshua referred to as our high priest after the order of Melchizedek forever? Because there is a law. And it never went away with.
How bad it got back then, they tied a rope on the priest's leg. If they didn't do it right, Yahweh killed them, had to drag them out there and send another one.
I mean, we're looking forward on the Day of Atonement. That is hard. You've got to fast, because to do what Yahweh wants you to do, you're going to fast. You're not going to eat. You're not going to drink. And it's not an easy day. I'm not saying it's an easy day, but think about what Yeshua is doing for you on that day. Man, he's literally there before the Father on our behalf, making atonement for us. How great a thing. And then you get to go right into the tabernacle.